Hey guys, happy 2019. I'm starting this process a bit later than I had originally planned, but I had the unplanned flu, and the unplanned flu kept me down for 2 weeks, and today's my first day back, and I'm so excited to be here. And so I'm starting my 30 days later than intended, but you know what? That does happen to all of us. So 2019 I thought would start on the 1st, and it's really starting for me on the 7th. And since there's no time and space in God, I'm really good with this. So 6 years ago, I wrote this book called A Year of Good, Daily Lessons for the Mystic in Training, and it's based upon the Christian mystics work, Emma Curtis Hopkins. And she wrote a book called Scientific Mental Christian Practice back in the 1800s. And the book was a real treatise on how to shift the mind so that it's aligned with the higher soul purpose intent. And in that shift, having an entire life shift, including well being and including living right livelihoods. So it's like when we are aligned with our soul, then all is well inside our world, even if the world outside isn't so well. So it's really a lovely practice to engage in a regular contemplation on the presence of this thing that we call God. So I Emma Curtis Hopkins, I'll just spend just a second talking about her because I'll talk more about her in the 30 days. But she was considered to be the teacher of all teachers. And that's because she taught leaders who would go on and be founders and contributors to the New Thought movement in the United States. And this was a big deal. She taught the Fillmores, who went on to be the founders of Unity, which is a metaphysical Christianity, Religious Science, which is now called Center for Spiritual Living, which is inclusive of all religions but has the same spiritual principles that exist within all of them. And then she also taught the Kramers, Nona Brooks and Melinda Kramer, who would start the Divine Science movement. So this one big faith believer ended up in several generations, ending up touching millions upon millions of people through her work of connecting with her God within. So, what I did is I took her book and studied it for a year, and I pulled out phrases each day that I thought were really pertinent to contemplation, and then I contemplated upon them. And with the contemplation, I wrote what came through for me with the idea that it will inspire you. So, the whole concept behind this is not what I wrote, although if that inspires you and uplifts you, great. But it really is, how do you take this contemplation in you, in your body, in your being, in your mind, in your soul, and what do you come up with for that? So, Emma starts her book, as I did my book, with this sentence. It is the first idea with which mind everywhere in all ages has begun when proclaiming that outside of and greater than any power exhibited by anything in nature or in man is a being called God. So this is the contemplation for today. It is the first idea with which mind everywhere in all ages has begun when proclaiming that outside of and greater than any power exhibited by anything in nature or in man is a being called God. And so in my journal, this is what I wrote about that contemplation, about that thing that is bigger than any man or anything in nature, and that is called God. And this is what I wrote in my journal. I walked in the woods surrounding the property of Summer Church Camp. I quietly moved towards the trees as something within me shifted and my vision was no longer exclusively mine. It was bigger than me, yet coming through me. The trees morphed from green and brown statues into moving light energy. I felt the vibration of the ground beneath me, the earth's hum. At that moment, I was one with nature, and I could see the light around me and coming from within me. Nature with a capital N. Nature and I shared the same light with a capital L, which was inner, outer, and outer, inner. Simultaneously, I experienced three homeless men huddled on the street in downtown Seattle, 80 miles away, drunk with an empty bottle of hard liquor between them. They were huddled in a doorway covered with cardboard and blankets. They too lived in this light, and yet it wasn't embodied like it was with the trees. The nutrients of the light was present, just not recognized and integrated. I felt as though they didn't know how to or wouldn't allow the light of their being to connect with the light which surrounded them. They were disconnected from their energy source. The inner and the outer weren't in sync. I walked across the camp property into a 1940s style cabin turned meeting space where a workshop on relationships were underway. I stood along the back wall observing 12 people seated in a circle, each one surrounded by the same light. They spoke of why they couldn't have a loving relationship, but I saw it. They were the love that they were seeking. The room was filled with love as this light, yet they weren't in touch with it. I wanted to scream, "Don't you see? Don't you know?" And yet I knew it wasn't mine to do. It was theirs to discover, choose, become, and accept in their own way. Just as it was with the homeless gentleman I saw, with or without relationship, they were enough. They were a manifest form of light. They were, I was, the trees were, and the street people were light, love in form. I walked out of the classroom to sit on the grass. A friend approached me to talk, and within minutes I was back into ordinary consciousness. This was my second direct experience of God. Emma's work begins with God as the first idea. So here's my homework assignment for you. Today, sit for 5 minutes and in your sitting, contemplate the first idea, God. Greater than any power exhibited in form is the only power which is taking form, God. Allow the contemplation to open you and journal about it. This is day 1, and I'm going with you for 30 days. Happy New Year.